Well, it's another episode of my video diary. And I'm kind of starting to think of this more and more that way. I kind of rejected that notion. I don't know. I have a lot of issues. You know, I want to be successful at everything I do, or at least, I'd like to be successful at something. And that hasn't really been the case throughout my life. So I would like to do YouTube successfully, but I understand that this level of effort that I'm putting into it is not ever going to result in success. But I have made efforts in the past and still didn't have the success I was hoping to have. So there's like some bitterness there. So my instinct is to reject this idea of a video diary because that's kind of just feels pathetic, or did. But I'm starting to feel like that's actually not a bad idea because I do have kids. And I don't know, just the idea of there being something of me left when I'm gone that my kids might be interested in looking at. But maybe even they wouldn't, I mean, my kids love me. And I'm sure they'll be sad when I'm gone. But whether or not they'd be interested in poring over hours of me babbling about nothing, I don't know. I wouldn't expect them to. But in the off chance that they are, maybe in the weeks following my death, when they're still grieving, they might be interested in seeing me still alive and thinking and talking. That might bring them some solace. And just to know me as a person, which, I hope to live a lot longer. They will know me as a person, but you know how your relationship with your kids is. There's only so much you're going to confide in your kids because your problems aren't their problems, You're there to provide for them. They're not there to provide you emotional support or anything like that. And that's one of the things that I think defines like bad parents. I see these mothers, it's oftentimes single mothers that basically they need their kids as a friend or as just somebody so they're not lonely. And they kind of put this responsibility on their kid to be their friend or their surrogate husband or whatever. And that's like the basis of a lot of bad parenting. And it's funny because Hollywood portrays that as good parenting because, of course, if Hollywood believes something, it's quite possible, or quite likely, I should say, that the exact opposite is true. So when they portray this single mother, having like a friendship relationship with her kids as like a great thing, that's a terrible thing. That's not what your kids need from you. Kids don't need a buddy, they need a friend. It's you that needs the buddy. And so you're putting your needs ahead of your kid. Anyway, totally different topic. But then again, this is a video diary, so we can talk about anything I want. And the reason why I'm kind of leaning into the video diary thing on this video is, unlike other videos, I often do have, because I'm an opinionated guy, I guess I'm like the crazy uncle type. See, that's the difference is if people respect you, then you're somebody has expertise and knowledge and stuff. But if they don't respect you, you're just the crazy uncle babbling. It's all a matter of the eye of the beholder. Just like, there was a funny Saturday Night Live skit years and years ago about like Tom Brady. I believe it was Tom Brady was hosting the show, and so they did this skit where it was like he would say like all this like super raunchy stuff to the women at work, and they just loved it. Like, ha ha ha, you're so funny, you're so cute. And then this unattractive guy comes up and is basically like says like something completely innocuous, like, do you have a pen I can borrow or something? And they report him to HR for sexual harassment. It's everything's in the eye of the beholder. So we can get into a debate of whether I deserve respect. Have I gotten I believe I have quite a bit of knowledge on a lot of things, but that's just not the way the world works, and you can't really view it as a victim thing. Like, the way the world works is you have to get credentials. You have to have the credentials, the pieces of paper. You have to make the right friends and everything. That's what it's all about, And if you don't have those skills, then you didn't win in life. I used to spend a lot of time worrying about whether that was fair or whatever, but sitting around worrying about whether society is fair is about as useful as worrying about whether the tides are fair. I'd like it to be low tide all the time. It's not fair that it's high tide. It's totally no point in that. It's like a moronic thought process. The tides are what they are. There's no fair or unfair about it. And so, because to somebody that had the skill sets to succeed under the rules of our society, I'm sure they think it's very fair. They just think people without those skills are inadequate, and they're bitter. And I think they're right, but a lot of things can be right at the same time. But I don't know. Just there's certain things I'm not even comfortable revealing on here because, like I said, some person I don't know might actually watch this. Very unlikely at this point, but maybe one or two someday would see this, and so I don't want to get too personal, but there's some things bothering me right now, and it's just long-standing stuff that it kind of just gets like when you have a situation that you want to improve, and for so many years you were perhaps naive, but certainly idealistic about the idea that they could improve. When you truly wrap your head around the reality that it's never going to improve, it's what you think it is. Devastating. I'm in a right-only lane. I need to get over. Okay. It's just, I don't know. Like, I have, I guess, a lot of abandonment issues. And I don't have a large social support system, but I really don't have any social support system. So it's like, just this idea of being alone is terrifying because, when people talk about being alone in relationships, they're not talking about literally being alone because they have friends and family and stuff like that. They're using that term alone, in a specific context, meaning not in a relationship. But for me, if I wasn't in the relationship I'm in, I literally would be alone. I'd be sitting in a one-bedroom apartment somewhere. Nothing, nobody to talk to. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about, but life's tough. Life's tough for everybody. I mean, we're all. The thing I was thinking about last night as I was falling asleep is this idea that the ultimate thing that just makes life suffering, and the Buddhists talk about this, and it's obvious, is the notion that we're all gonna die. I mean, that right there is just looming over everybody, and I feel like that is like the key to so much of our psychology. Like, there's so much of our psychology that we don't link to that I think might be very closely linked to it. Like, I think all fear might be linked to the fear of death. Like, this fear that I have of being alone, and all these other fears that people have, anything, like, just name it, fear of heights, fear of drowning in the ocean, like, you're just afraid of the immensity of the ocean. I think it all really boils down to a fear of death. And if you can meditate, and again, I know this isn't like some groundbreaking thing I'm saying. I'm sure all kinds of philosophers and stuff talked about this. But if you could, which I haven't come close to doing, don't get me wrong, not even close. But if you could meditate on death for long enough to the point where you truly accepted death, I'm talking truly, which I think is an extremely difficult thing, if not an impossible thing to do. I'm not sure if anyone has ever achieved this. But if hypothetically, you could meditate on death long enough that you totally accepted death and you no longer feared death, then I think that would eliminate every other fear that you have. Because just think about it, like if you accept that you're just not even going to be here anymore, and you're not afraid of that, then why would you be afraid of being alone? Being alone is nothing. Anything that could happen to you, like you drown, well, you've already accepted. Now drowning might not be particularly pleasant, but it'll be over in a couple of minutes and you'll never remember it because you'll be dead. And so, yeah, like I think I could think about this a lot longer and maybe try to write my thoughts down and come up with, more on this. It's hard for me to articulate it fully, but again, I'm sure other people have made this point. It feels like a really true point. And maybe subconsciously I'm getting it from somewhere. Maybe I've already heard people talk about this, but to me, it's just obvious. Like once you've accepted death, then there's nothing else to fear, because the fear of death is the root of all other fears. That's my opinion. And so I think maybe a lot of my neuroticism, a lot of my fears have to do with I have an overly intense fear of death, I guess. Because death does occupy my thoughts, Like the older I get, the more death occupies my thoughts. Like I'm only 48. Now, that's not young, but it's not super old where like I should be just thinking about death all the time, But I think about it quite a bit. Like, I don't know. I have this just depressing way of thinking where I've always had like this feeling that, and again, I think this has to do with the fear of death, is that everything is always declining. You're always getting older. Things are getting worse, And that's because we're all slowly moving towards death, And if that's like some huge fear that lingers over you, then that, that is such a powerful fear. That's such a powerful thing in your mind that it's gonna dominate your thoughts, The reason why I just paused is because I had a thought in my head. I was thinking, this might be a terrible thought, I don't know, but this is my diary. So I'm wondering if there's a certain amount of, now obviously it's a terrible thing, it's a terrible experience. I'm sure there's very little good about it. I'm not saying there's anything good about it, but when someone has like a terminal illness or terminal, say terminal cancer, any kind of terminal illness, and I'm sure it's a terrible thing to go through, mentally, I'm saying, forget about the physical aspects of it, all the pain and everything, but mentally it's a terrible thing. But I wonder if some people with terminal illness, they get some kind of a freeing feeling, because death is now certain. It's been decided. So it's not something hanging over you anymore. It's not like, when am I going to die? How am I going to die? It's something that you have to truly just embrace. I'm not saying embrace in terms of you're accepting it, that you're happy about or anything. I mean embrace that you truly have to come to terms with the fact that yes, in 6 months I will be dead, or as it progresses, in 2 weeks, I probably won't be alive in 2 weeks. I feel like once you've truly accepted that, if they ever do, though, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I understand what's going on, because I never could, but I'm saying that if they do get to a point where they accept the reality of it, they get out of denial, and they say to themselves, yes, I will be gone. I wonder if there's any kind of an aspect where that's freeing, because it seems like that should be the end of fear, because there's nothing else to fear. I mean, you already know that what you've always perceived as the worst possible thing to happen is going to happen. And so I have no doubt that some people go through that, and they're terrified, right, up until their last breath, because and certainly I'm not faulting them. I guess that I probably will be terrified of death up into my last breath. I mean, it's just ingrained in humanity. All I'm saying is that if somehow somebody, maybe a hardcore Buddhist or something, if they could somehow get to this point where they truly don't fear it, they say, okay, that's it, I'll be gone, or maybe through religion, Christianity, if you truly, which I wish I did. I really wish I truly believed that life was eternal, because I'm a huge supporter of Christianity. I'm one of these anachronisms. I'm one of these old-fashioned people that I think what it preaches is good stuff. It preaches love, and now everybody thinks, oh, well, that's all just hypocrisy, because that's the left has spread that propaganda. That the very fact that it espouses good stuff is why you shouldn't like it, because it's all, hypocrisy. Every Christian in every show and movie is a hypocrite and stuff, But that's simply not the case. Of course, hypocrisy is a human trait. Of course, there's hypocrites, and many of them. But that's not every person. Some people have truly believed in Christianity and lived, millions and millions and millions of people throughout history did believe in these good things and live their lives according to them. They were faithful to their wives. Unlike on Hollywood shows and movies, the super Christian guy isn't always cheating on his wife. In fact, most of the time, the super Christian guy is not cheating on his wife. And so on and so forth. So I support Christianity as an institution. I support what it represents here on earth. But I wish I could just have total conviction that I was going to heaven, when I died, but I don't. I think that most likely I simply won't exist anymore. And, my point is that people that do truly believe that, maybe they face death without fear. I don't know. And then the Buddhists who, they don't believe that they're coming to an end because they don't think they ever existed in the first place, which is an oversimplification, I know, for if somebody's going to come on here and criticize my understanding of Buddhism. But essentially, they believe that the I, as a separate and distinct entity from the rest of reality, doesn't actually exist, and so therefore it can't cease to exist. And so, I can see how they could, if they truly believed that right down to their bones, then maybe they could face death without fear as well. But anyway, as you can see, it's kind of thoughts that I have, and it's just, there's just so much to it, just who I've always been. I've never been a social person and stuff. People think introverts don't need people and social interaction and stuff, but they do. It's a lot of times it's very painful that they shy away from it because they're not good at it, and this, that, and the other thing, but it still hurts that they don't have it. And, you know, whatever, like, say, I don't know, I mean, it's not like I've ever been diagnosed, but whatever potential personality disorder I have or whatever that just makes it really hard for me to get along with people, like, it's always just like I'm rubbing people the wrong way. I think they're scheming against me or something. I don't know. It's just a lot of bullshit that I no point in getting into here because I don't think I'm even capable of articulating it. But it's just like, basically life has just been hard just because of what's going on in my own head, you know? I think I was actually born with pretty good gifts. I mean, I was a pretty smart person. I was athletic. I mean, one thing is I'm not attractive, but I don't think I'm like hideous either. So it's not like, you know, I wasn't born with like a hair lip, but like I didn't have some like big thing weighing me down, you know, physically or intellectually. It was just all mentally, psychologically. So, and it's just, you know, and it's like, a lot of things tangibly haven't gone well. Like, you know, I have no career really. But on the other hand, through real estate investing and stuff, I'm in a pretty economically strong position. I mean, I'm probably in the top, I don't know, who gives a shit really. But the point is, I'm you know, I'm not homeless. I'm not living in a 1-bedroom apartment. You know, I have a wife and 2 kids. I live in a nice house. I have assets. But like none of it ever makes me happy, you know? And it's because like my relationships with people just suck. And that's what makes you happy. All right, well, this has been a completely just random it's pity party, no point video. So I could probably just go on like this for hours, but I think you get the point, you know, just kind of dealing with some angst right now. So, but that's kind of like my, you know, my baseline state anyway. So, all right. See you next one.